Hello, and welcome to the Security Strategist, a podcast where we have a weekly conversation with people impacting the enterprise technology landscape. My name is Steffen. I'm the Vice President of EMA in Information Security Research, and I will be your host for today's podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Sudhir Reddy, Chief Technology Officer at Esper, about the critical balance between security and user experience on dedicated devices. We'll talk about some unique challenges of securing the hardware at the edge, the role of MDM, complexities of updates and patching, and practical first steps for enterprise can take to optimize their dedicated device fleets. All that sounds like a whole bunch of words that basically says, Sudhir and I are going to sit here and have a chat because we have plenty to talk about. So with that, let's get started. Sudhir, why don't you give me a quick introduction and talk to me a little bit about what's going on at Esper?
Yeah. Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. And
you got it.
Here to be talking to everyone here. So I am the CTO at Esper, and what we do is manage dedicated devices in very simple terms. And if you look at the landscape now, what we're talking about when we say dedicated devices is all these things that you see when you walk into an airport or into a restaurant or into a hospital. You see all these devices that are sitting there. Either it's just a screen that's displaying something for you, or it's a kiosk where you're going and answering things. Or in the case of an airport, it may be a check-in counter. In the case of a restaurant, it may be a point-of-sale machine that somebody's plugging things into. All of these are what we call dedicated devices, as in they're dedicated for one purpose, that the purpose that they're doing. And that's a unique landscape, much different from what most people are used to in terms of laptops and phones, which are things that you handle every day, and there's a human that interacts with it all the time. We help manage those devices and secure those devices in the real world. That's what we do.
Yeah, great summary. And anybody who has not been living in a cave for the last, decade or more has had an experience one of these devices, whether they like them, don't like them, whatever. Even if you're taking and placing an order at any fast food restaurant in this day and age, you are getting to interface with one of these devices. But they bring such an interesting dynamic to security and compliance. Why is it so much more challenging to deal with security compliance issues on some of these dedicated hardware devices compared to like your traditional laptops, your mobile devices, your mobile phones, so on and so forth? What are the key factors in securing these specialized devices, and what makes it such a complicated undertaking?
Yeah, to give you a short answer and then I'll expand on it, it is the presence of humans. Right? In the case of laptops and other devices like phones, you actually have a human that's handling the device, and they know what they're trying to do. In a lot of cases, they don't, and we need to help secure that. But what we're talking about in dedicated devices is, in a lot of these situations, there's nobody around for days or weeks. And to make things more complicated, there are all these peripherals that are attached to these devices that need to operate. Think of barcode scanners when you're walking through a grocery store and scanning your things like that. All of these devices and peripherals become vectors for either an attack, or if it's a malicious case, or somebody is just negligent and they don't know better, and they let something into the system. And that can become the entry point for somebody who's trying to get into your rest of your infrastructure to get in there.
I guess the biggest key that we have to remember is that you take these devices for granted, right? They are these monolithic things that are out there. Whereas you might have your laptop or your phone with you all the time, and you're like, hey, you know what? I just saw something about that. Maybe I should update it or whatever. How many times do you really think to take and update the credit card machine? How many times do you really think to update the menu or the menu taker machine or whatever it's going to be? And the answer is you don't. Why? Because it's one of those things that just kind of is, right? You just, you don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. Whereas you then, if you really step back, you start to realize how critical those machines are and what they are connected to and what they have the ability to access and so on and so forth. And the fact that you're not updating them, it starts to get actually really scary when you start thinking about it, which also, by the way, is part of the reason that we kind of put our heads in the sand and sometimes don't think about them because, when you start talking about the low-hanging fruit in the information security space, that ain't one of them. And it's one of the things that scares the bejeebers out of people.
By design, these things are meant to fade into the background, meant to not interrupt with your whatever it is that you're doing, unless you need to interact with it and things. So you're right. By design, they're meant to not be something that you think about constantly and think about, especially in the security sense. Now, to make that complicated, a lot of these systems also need constant updates. So think of a menu system in a restaurant. By design, you have to update the menus all the time because that's what your company is doing, is looking at what menus work and what don't. And you need to be able to push updates to software. Or if it's an advertising platform, you need to be able to push new advertisements to the thing, new content to the device, etc. So it becomes this interesting balance of you need to be constantly pushing software to this device. At the same time, you don't want to compromise what's on the device. And now we're not only talking about software. Think about things like, hey, there's a USB port that was not secure, and somebody can just plug a USB stick into the thing, and now you have a vulnerability right there without even thinking about it. So the world of dedicated devices, while it has a lot in common with multi-purpose devices, also has its own unique challenges, and that's what securing CISOs of the world today, where they're managing large fleets of these, and we're talking tens of thousands of these devices, not 5, not 10, not 20, but thousands of these across their fleet, and they have to manage them securely.
That's right. And again, by design, all of these devices have an interface, right? They have something that is some kind of UX for the world to use, and almost all of them have some kind of management function, whether it be, you have to scan a code or you type in a password or whatever have you. Some of them, like you mentioned, have things that crack me up, like an exposed USB port that you can plug something into. I mean, hacker's delight, right? Yeah, I mean, if there's anything in the world that I like more as a bad guy, is to take and just plug my doomsday USB stick into an exposed USB port and see what I can do, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Again, you got to take those things into kind of consideration. And in my opinion, it sheds light into why MDM, mobile device management, is considered that first line of defense. Beyond the basic functionalities, how can MDM be strategically leveraged to not just secure these devices, but also contribute to the UX, that user experience? And what MDM features are more crucial to achieving this kind of dual goal of user experience and device management?
Yeah, so balancing that, like I said, right, you want to be able to push new software and a new innovation that your labs and your developers are developing all the time to these devices, yet always constantly have them secure. So that's why I like to use the phrase, you want to do the things that you want to do, but the phrase I like to use is you shouldn't have to manage these things. These things should just happen on these devices. And what I mean by that is, imagine a program where you have set up saying, here's my security stance. And we haven't talked about compliance yet. Compliance is another aspect of this, where not only do you have to have these systems secure, but you also have some regulatory or some policy compliance that you need to adhere to. That.
Yeah, keep in mind, all these devices are taking credit cards, right? I mean, again, what point of sale machine out there doesn't have a credit card acceptance feature in it, right? And if it doesn't, then you're losing your mind, right? I mean, these are things that are doing financial transactions. Moreover, I'll even go to the other compliance side. They're all collecting PII. I'll pick on McDonald's, my great friends. They collect my information every single time that I go to McDonald's. Why? Because I use their app, I scan their code, I take and do this, but it not only has my order history, it has, all my credit card information, my email addresses, my blah, 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 blah. I'm sure they own my firstborn child. All of those things, right?
They at least know about your firstborn child.
And they know my whole family, right? And they know that one of the kids likes chicken nugget Happy Meals and one of them likes a hamburger Happy Meal. So, for sure, they know all those things, right? So I didn't mention it before, and I'm glad you did. We do need to take and mention the compliance aspect of it, because these devices are the human interface into a corporation and collect all of that data, not just financial information, but all of their, back-end sales information and marketing information and so on and so forth. That device analytics information is all right there on that point of sale machine.
Exactly. And one area we didn't mention, and I'll get back to your question right after that, is the medical side of things.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even go down that road. I mean, because that's another whole thing, right? I mean,
yeah.
and again, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. I'm trying not to take and make people's brains explode all at once, but
yeah.
You're absolutely correct, right? Those are things that are of even more critical nature because, again, who wants here's a true one, the actual password and or serial number and or device access information for your pacemaker out and about, right?
Yep.
I wish I was exaggerating, but that information is sometimes exposed. And you talk about something that has potential of being really scary and literally life-threatening. A lot different than a Happy Meal.
Yeah, exactly. Or knowing the name of your firstborn child, right? So this is impacting your life and many lives. So where MDM comes really into the picture is this is your interface to secure everything that's all happening on the device, whether it's bits and bytes that get on the device or whether it's what peripherals are allowed on the device, what device serial numbers of peripherals are allowed to talk to the device. All of these are things that managers of large fleets have to think about. And when I say set it and forget it or don't manage your devices, what I mean is what you want to do is be able to say, hey, here is my policy across the board for every single aspect of the device, whether it is what brightness the device should be at or what USB ports are open on the device or what time of day these devices should be allowed to be accessed. All of these things can be set in a device management platform, MDM. And then what you want to do is be able to just allow the fleet to self-heal, if you will, right? In the sense that they all get these settings and they're all uniform. And granted, some groups of devices have different settings than other groups, and you want to be able to configure all of that and seamlessly be able to then sit back and look at exceptions. You manage by exception, which is, hey, that one device, somebody compromised it and opened up a port that wasn't supposed to be open. Imagine you having to sit and scan 10,000 devices to look for that versus the system telling you, hey, that port was open, you need to go do something about that. And you wake up in the morning, you see an alert, you go respond to it and close off that vulnerability, right? So that's the kind of power a real good, sophisticated device management platform can bring to you.
Yeah, I mean, I know from my own personal experiences, I think I was managing 3,000 some devices at once, and these were just mobile devices, right, mobile phones. I just know how impossible it is to keep them synchronized and up to date. But again, you hear about the patches that come out that are critical nature, that are honest to God, real zero-day vulnerabilities, things that are being exploited in the wild. What are the biggest hurdles that organizations face when trying to patch and update their devices, and how do these challenges impact both security and device usability? I have obviously ideas about that. I can tell you that, having your device down for sometimes as much as an hour while it updates sucks, okay? And so having that device be updated in a way that doesn't really impact the end user, or at least doesn't do so significantly, is a real challenge. But give me your perspective about that. Talk to me a little bit about what are those biggest hurdles when trying to patch and update.
That's a great question. I deal with hundreds of companies that have devices out there and things. And part of what I preach is really about the rigor of it. The biggest challenge to everyone is the rigor. Oh, it's too hard to patch these devices. It takes too long. And you hit on something it takes downtime for these devices. And I can't let my business not run during the time that these devices are updating. And I always like to tell an interesting story. Today, if you think about it, you can update the systems on a car while it is running. You have the technology today to update a system. Literally, a car can update software while you're driving it, right?
Isn't it funny? There always used to be that joke of taking and changing a tire while the bus is going down the road, right? And we've actually gotten to the point today where I can actually do some of those things. We can actually take and on the fly, fix the engine tuning problem by, updating the computer while the engine is running and you're traveling. Sounds insane, but it actually is possible, right?
It is possible. My point here is it's really affecting a culture shift in terms of, if you think about the cloud world, right? If you think about how systems run in the cloud and things, that has gotten much more sophisticated in terms of patching and updating more regularly and things, because the tooling exists and has existed for a long time. In the device management world, that is coming into the forefront now in the last 5 or 6 years in terms of how do you enable that? How do you enable these devices to update not only patch levels, but remember, you also want to update your own software. If you're a restaurant, you want to push your own software regularly to these devices, and I'll touch upon an aspect of that in a minute. So the biggest hurdle the companies have is thinking that this is too hard. There is tooling out there, there are products out there that make this completely seamless for you and completely secure for you.
I wanted to mention there too, because you mentioned it specifically, one of the things that I have always heard from CISOs in general is that, long story short, the research that I did a year or so ago shows that the average tenure of a CISO is about 32 months, right? And in that 32 months, you figure they need 6 months to figure out where the water cooler is, 6 months to figure out where they should really be parking and meet with their teams and whatever have you. They have 12 months to take and then actually make some organizational change and so on and so forth. And then they're done, right? And so is MDM going to be one of the things that they take? And the answer has been generally no, because there is other low-hanging fruit that they deem to be less brain damage, that they're going to have a greater level of success. Doesn't talk about whether it's going to actually make a proactive and maturity impact on security in general, but they feel that they can take and get easier wins doing other things. It doesn't have to be that way. MDM does not have to be that hard. And again, I'll harken back to the days when I was a CIO and a chief architect. It was hard, okay? I mean, I'm not going to kid you, but those days are gone. And if you're a CISO taking and looking at your mobile device, architecture and environment in this state and saying, well, I don't want any part of that because, 15 years ago I tried it and almost had to kill myself. That's not the case we're talking about anymore. It's the technology and the methodology has improved dramatically since then.
Yeah. And one interesting trend I'm seeing in the CISO community now is, to them, the rest of the assets, think cloud assets and think physical security and all of that, have somewhat been solved in the sense that there's mature tooling out there, et cetera. And what CISOs are realizing now, especially CISOs of companies that are managing large fleets, is their biggest open vulnerability now is with these edge devices, and now they're starting to see, hey, there's real value in bringing in tooling that'll help me secure that side of things as much as there is to secure the cloud or physical security and things like that. Now, I haven't even gotten into things that they worry about in terms of, hey, new software keeps getting onto these devices all the time, and what vulnerabilities are in those software? What libraries are we using that have zero-day vulnerabilities that will get discovered tomorrow, and I need to patch that immediately before somebody realizes it and then goes and exploits that. So there's a time sensitivity to this too that they're starting to realize now.
So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So I mean, when you think about the reactive approach to security just in general, I think we can both agree that it's just not enough, right? I mean, yes, you got to take and do your patching. Yes, that makes all the sense in the world. But talk to me about being proactive a little bit. Heaven forbid that we be proactive, right? But talk to me about some proactive steps that organizations can take to minimize the vulnerabilities before they are exploited on some of these dedicated devices. Let's discuss some of those strategies for a moment and see where we end up there.
Yeah. So I'll start off my answer with the compliance side of things. A lot of times, if you look at regulated environments, et cetera, a big part of the compliance requirements is around security. You start there with looking at what are the things that could be potential vectors that somebody could exploit. And then start figuring out how do you then tighten that up? How do you close that hole in your device fleet? And MDMs can help you with that. They can help you with figuring out what the right things are, et cetera. And then what you want to do is codify that into your everyday. We call it DevOps for devices. So you do that DevOps. Now, you also want to have, so your development team, which is sitting in part of your organization, is building these apps that you're then putting onto these devices. can you now secure that app that goes on the devices, not in terms of how to get it to the device, but in terms of what vulnerabilities does it have, what libraries is it using that hasn't been patched. It's engineering teams are notorious for not updating the libraries
that is for sure.
And you have the opportunity now to block that from going onto the device, saying that, hey, this is using an old library with a known vulnerability. I'm not going to allow it on these devices. So there are things that you can do very proactively. I call it preventive maintenance. It's like you're going to the annual for your annual physical every year. Similarly, you need to do your weekly or monthly checkups every time to make sure that the software that you have. And by the way, all of this can be automated. You don't have to manually do any of this. If a new version of your app shows up, there's tooling that'll scan it and tell you, here's the vulnerable libraries, please reject it. Or, hey, everything's good, ready to ship to the device. The other thing to do, which we've realized in the last few months that has become super critical, is you don't roll all of these things out to your entire fleet all at once. You want to have some kind of a pipelining mechanism or a way to roll it out to a small set of devices, maybe one store, give it a try, see how it goes, and then you expand that. So we call it pipelines and stages in the classic DevOps world. And now you're limiting your exposure as you're testing out new software or new things that come out.
Yeah, if you take one thing from this conversation we're having today, that's what you should be taking away. Not because it's not just common sense, because I think that it is, but this doesn't have to be everything all at once. We talked about the critical nature of zero-day threats and so on and so forth, and I'm not denying those things. But that doesn't mean that you push the update to everybody in the world all within 5 seconds. At minimum, the absolute minimum, take your core group of IT and security nerds and push it to them first, right? Because if something goes horribly wrong, because of course that never happens either, but if something goes horribly wrong, then you're just breaking your friends and family. Whereas if you take and break the CEO and his entire executive team and the entire sales team and the entire remote marketing team and everybody all at once, you're not going to be happy with your life, right? And even with the best solutions out there, that graduated approach for the unexpected is always going to make the most sense. And I can't recommend that enough. The perfect example that I use is that our good friends at Apple are notorious about releasing an operating system, find out 5 days later that there was a flaw in it, and then you got to do the process all over again. And so I will generally wait a day or two or three or a week or a month before I even take and bother updating it, because I'll let somebody else be the guinea pig first. I promise you, apart from that, before I update my mother's iPhone or iPad, I am going to do the update first, because you have no idea of the fresh hell we're talking about when your parents, who are geriatric and the best of days, have a device that doesn't work very well. And that's just, again, that's personal experience. Never mind that same experience with 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 devices in your environment.
Yeah. And speaking of the elderly, a lot of our customers are in the medical business and they're in medical studies. They have these devices with the elderly or differently enabled people that can't even, they don't know how to handle situations.
That's right.
Don't work. So you have to be darn sure that the thing is going to work when it reaches there. And there are ways and there are mechanisms in place. So yeah, the one thing that people have to realize is, two things, if I can cheat a little bit, is be proactive about these things, because you don't want to react to these once an issue has happened. And second is to gradually roll out to your fleet and do it in a systematic way, in an automated way, so that it secures your entire system and you can rest at night and sleep.
Hopefully, right? So we have very little time left. I have two other questions that I want to ask you. One is, I keep on thinking about organizations trying to start this process. Where should they begin? What are some practical steps that they can take to improve their security posture without destroying the world, so on and so forth? Let's talk about that one, and then we'll do a quick summary.
I think the first thing, oftentimes, and I say this to engineering teams all the time, is you're thinking of the full problem and how to solve the full problem, and thereby you're in analysis paralysis, right?
You got it.
So I would say the first thing that companies need to do is pick the smaller things that you know are the biggest problems. Usually it's the small things that you can fix that are the bigger problems. So look at your rules of what you're allowing or not allowing on these devices and fix that and encode that and automate that. And now you move on to the next bigger problem and next bigger problem. Start somewhere. You know, about the 1,000-mile journey starts with a single step. Start somewhere. Don't get paralyzed by the enormity of the problem.
Yep.
And the second thing I'd say here is, while CISOs and CIOs are looking into the vast landscape of the cloud side of things, because that is where a majority of the software is running, don't ignore the device side of things, or don't ignore what's happening at the edge. We have not even touched upon IoT yet in this conversation, but now you're talking about millions of devices just sitting around and things. So start with that is the most vulnerable thing, because people have physical access to these things. They can. I've seen cases where they've soldered new circuit boards onto a device, so they can exploit these things. So start with securing those and figuring out where the things are, and then there's tooling out there to help you. There are people that are experts at this that we can help out with in terms of where to start and things. So there's a lot of there's maturity in that market.
Yeah, and I can't agree with you more there. When you're looking at some of these problems and you're a CISO that feel like you're getting a little overwhelmed, phone a friend. I mean, again, contact Shahir, contact me. I will be happy to point you to resources. I'll be the first to tell you, I don't know every damn thing about this either, right? And so I know in the security space, taking and phoning a friend is critical for CISOs. If you had one takeaway that you would share very quickly about the conversation today, or just in general for CISOs, what would it be?
It would be that be proactive about your device fleets. It would be, don't make it an afterthought. Don't make it a thing that you would look at after you've solved the rest of the problem, because the rest of the problem has become harder for hackers or malicious actors to get to, although not impossible by any means. Now they're discovering that these are this places where they have easy access. They walk into any store and they have access to your entire network if it's not secure enough. So be proactive about the device side of things.
No, I think that's awesome. Fantastic conversation. We could obviously speak for another 6 hours. I would love to have the conversation about IoT, because that should be scaring everybody to death, but that's another conversation for another day. I appreciate you coming on this podcast today. Thank you, everybody out there listening. We hope that you took a lot away from today's podcast. For more information about what we talked about, head over to esper.io. Great website. They can give you more information there. We'll be back next week with another episode in our podcast series. Until then, make certain that you subscribe to the podcast on all the major platforms and follow the conversation on our social channels, EM360 Tech on X and LinkedIn. And for more great daily content, head over to em360tech.com. With that, again, thanks for listening and have a great day.